Record. Hey everyone, welcome back to She Burbs Podcast. Today's guest is Rebecca Forster. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello there. How are you?
Thank you so much for being a guest today on my podcast.
Oh, absolutely delighted.
So, can you tell our listeners when you first realized you wanted to become an author?
I sure can, because it's a strange story and probably one they're not going to hear from many authors. So I actually never planned on being an author. I had gone to school, I got my MBA, I was working corporately, and had never really thought about writing. And my client was actually married to a very well-known author. And when I heard her name, I had no idea who she was. And my secretary thought that was very funny, and it turned out to be Danielle Steele. And I know. And so like I'm meeting this lady and just thinking, oh, wow, whatever, it's the client's wife. And I know how, now I realize, oh my gosh. And so I made the dumb remark that when my secretary said, and excuse me, but these are the old days. So that's what we called them, secretaries. We didn't say, administrative assistants and all that. So everybody has to forgive me. When she told me, I'm like, oh, I could do that. And so she thought that was hilarious. She told everyone in the office, which was like 3 stories, high-rise stories of people, that I was going to write a book. So I had to write a book. So that's what I did.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
And believe me, nobody was more surprised than I was when somebody showed interest in it. I almost fell off my chair. So I did write a first book. It did get published, and then it became kind of like a little bit like Las Vegas. When you put a quarter in and you win $5. You get all excited about it. So I thought, oh, I bet I can do this again. And the bad thing was the first couple of books were bought, and then there were a bunch of rejections. And then I was like crazy. Well, can I write a book or can't I write a book? So it just kind of, snowballed from there. I thought I had very good luck the first time, and second and third. And then what I realized was I really needed to learn the craft of writing, which I hadn't done, because this was all just kind of a lark, coming off a dare. And so I kind of put my nose to the grindstone and started learning about how you really put together, a good book. And that's how it started. Oh, I've lost you. I've lost your sound.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Wow, it's amazing. Can you hear me now?
Oh. Yeah, I can. We must have a little lag. Okay.
So when I was going through your website, I saw all of your books, and most of the themes in your books is like law, kind of like courtroom and stuff. I really love it because it reminds me of Law and Order, and that's my favorite show.
Oh, don't I wish? Yes, don't I wish? Actually, yeah, I guess. So I really have this thing about justice, and I think it's because I'm inspired by my husband. My husband is currently, he's a Superior Court judge here in California. Wow. And Hostile Witness, which was the first Josie Bates book, was inspired because he was one of the first judges to have a teenager tried as an adult.
Oh,
and yeah, I was really enthralled with that idea because I didn't know how I felt about that. And I don't think he did either, quite frankly. I think it was very hard for him to see, a 16-year-old kid in court every day, and knowing that the penalty would be based on the fact that they were trying him as an adult. And so that's where Hostile Witness came from. And so many, in fact, all of my books really are based on something in the law or in the justice system that I kind of find intriguing. Like should there really be attorney-client privilege if someone's going to get hurt by keeping a secret? So they're not all courtroom dramas. I do love action adventure. So I tend to kind of, create an action adventure underlying story within my work. But I always default to that little bit of, is this really right? Is this really justice? That's been a theme that's always intrigued me. And I think it intrigues a lot of readers because you want someone to root for, you know?
Right.
And boy, a 16-year-old tried as an adult, I'll root for them. I think, who knows, depending on the crime. So I'm a big crime lover and thriller girl. Yeah.
That reminds me of the story on Lifetime with the 15-year-old girl that was tried for an adult because she murdered someone in the military.
Yeah. And see, we all think that is, I mean, we've heard that a lot now, but back when Hostile Witness was first written, it was brand new. And I really don't think anybody has come to a conclusion yet as to whether it's right or wrong, and some of the crimes are horrendous. But again, it's a teenager, it's a chronological age versus the maybe the mental age or the circumstances. I love books where you come away kind of having more questions than you started with. I think those are intriguing.
I agree. So can you give our listeners like a brief summary of your Josie Bates thriller series, like all of the books within the series?
Sure. There's 8 books in that particular series, and another huge thing I love are personal relationships, because I think it's very hard to have a personal relationship that's successful these days. I think we all are looking for kind of that perfect, perfect for us, only we're not quite sure what perfect is. And so in the Josie Bates series, I brought together a sort of cobbled together family. The attorney who is single, she's 40. The girl she defends, Hannah, is multiracial, and she has a really bad family background. She eventually is incorporated into Josie's life. Josie's lover, who has his own problems, and a young boy who's in the beach town. So they all are flawed people, and none of them really have families. And I love the fact that, especially these 4, there's other characters, but these 4, through the course of 8 books, have come together as a family, mostly because they all have a really highly honed sense of justice. What's interesting and how they stay together is that sometimes the prism through which they look at what they consider justice is different. So a young girl, especially a multiracial girl, will look at a problem differently than our white, older attorney, than her lover, than this kid who is basically a latchkey kid on the beach. They're all going to have different views, but they admire each other for their strength and their willingness to think through problems and their willingness to defend one another. And so the family dynamic has always been really important to me. And I think that's because I have been super blessed with strong families on both sides. I just celebrated my 45th wedding anniversary. Yeah. No. long time. And we both have big families. And the one thing I know is that when the zombie apocalypse comes, somebody's got our back. And that's what, in all my books, yes, there's exciting plots. Yes, there's questions of justice, but in all my books, what really is the grounding is that the characters must have someone they can count on. And so to me, the Josie Bates series, and it's not just to me, I've heard this from readers too, it's all about this intricacy of relationships that really these people don't belong together, and yet they create this wonderful, wonderful, strong group of people.
Right. I love it. I can't wait to start it, because
I'm
gonna start the Josie series, the Finn series, and your book, Before Her Eyes, because
Before Her Eyes, my favorite. That's my favorite. That one's a very personal book, and yeah, that one's definitely different. I adore it.
What inspired that one?
Well, what inspired that one was my dad and my father-in-law were both very ill at the same time. And because I didn't go to an office, I wrote, so I would often sit with them for long periods of time when the others in the family couldn't be with them. They passed away within 3 months of each other. And what was the interesting journey and what inspired Before Her Eyes was, both of them had these experiences as they came to the end of their life where they literally, their life was passing before their eyes. They were, they were seeing people who weren't there. They were actually quite peaceful. They were coming to grips with a lot of things in their lives. And I was fascinated that there was this parallel universe going on. And so in Before Her Eyes, I was also very impressed by how hard people work and fight to stay alive. So in Before Her Eyes, everybody is experiencing some kind of death, a spiritual death, a physical death. And it's really a thriller about the lengths people will go to
Like to stay alive. So
latch on to that last bit of life. So I know it sounds morbid, but it's really, I love this book because it's written first person, third person. I love the heroine. She really has to come to grips with a life that was tough on her, none of it her fault. And I don't know, there was something about that book that just, it's still, when I read it, I'm like, yeah, that was the right book to write.
Yeah, I can't wait to start that one. So can you give us, I want a brief summary of it. Can you give our listeners a brief summary?
Well, you know what? You are just going to have no time at all. You're just going to be sitting reading all my books, and that's all there is to it.
You do have a lot. You do have a lot.
I do. I actually have more than that are up there, but those are the ones I really like that are up there. And that, as I said, it took me a while to learn the craft. And so there was a point where I kind of cut off republishing for digital consumption, the really, really early books. Not that I'm ashamed of them at all. I just think there came a point where there was that epiphany and things kind of, crossed over, and it was like, okay, now I'm a writer. Now I'm an author. And I think that moment before was all about learning. It's kind of like grade school and middle school, and suddenly you get to high school and it's like, oh, that's pretty good. And then you get to college, you're like, oh yeah, I got it. So that's it.
That's true. So can you give us a brief summary of your book, Before Her Eyes?
Oh geez. Yeah, I can, if I remember right. This was a while ago. Basically it's a small town grocer is executed in a mountain town. And this is a town between, it's a made up town, but I live in California and I travel to Oregon quite a bit. So it's sort of this beautiful forest on the border of California and Oregon. And so this grocer is executed, and a woman has been abducted from the scene. So you've got a parallel story of a woman running for her life and the small town sheriff trying to figure out not only why she's gone and who kidnapped her, but trying to figure out why his very good friend is dead. And he finds that his little tiny town, which I think is indicative of any town or any even family, it doesn't have to be a big city. He just finds out that the people that he has known all these years are really not what they seem. Everybody has a secret. Everybody has something they're striving for. Sometimes it's, a small thing, which is just, I need a little bit of extra money. Sometimes it's a big thing. I know I'm dying of cancer, and, I have to do everything, including sacrifice someone else to try to stay alive. And so those are the themes I go through. But I love that tiny enclave setting. And I went to a small town and talked to a small town sheriff when I did this, because he said, you have no idea the trauma you go through, because these are your friends, these are your neighbors. And if you have to deal with something that's really horrendous, you don't want to, but you have to sort of set that aside. And it's hard because you have no other community. You just have this community. And I appreciated his input so much. It was actually kind of changed the book around a little bit. It wasn't that hard driving sheriff. It was, was a more sensitive to the community kind of guy.
Wow, I love that. I can't wait to read it. I'm excited now. The whole
I
time,
hope you like it. If you don't like it, don't say.
oh no, 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 I wouldn't do that. So, can you tell our listeners what inspired Finn O'Brien, your thriller series? That one.
Yes, Finn O'Brien is pretty much police procedural, and also inspired by real life. All my books are inspired by real life. I either have known someone who had these problems, or it was a court case my husband had, or our cop friends. I mean, I love drawing from reality. So Finn O'Brien is my brother-in-law.
Oh wow.
Brother-in-law is actually from Croatia, and he came to the country when he was 17, and he still has a heavy accent. And he also is one of the smartest, most upstanding people I have ever met in my life. I mean, he's gone through so much hardship. He gets to this country, he makes a life for himself. He does this without complaint. And I thought, wow, he is so inspiring with this 1 foot back with his traditional values where he came from, and this other foot in modern, America, where he always tells me the story of being amazed at seeing so much food in grocery stores. He couldn't believe there was that much food.
Oh,
And
wow.
I thought, this is an interesting guy, someone with sort of these religious spiritual values over here, but he's a cop over here. And he was just kind of cool to me, and plus he's really cute, so there's that. But my mom was also an immigrant. She was from Germany, and she didn't speak English when she arrived in this country. And I had noticed the same thing about her, in that she was able to create this American persona, but you put her back in her native country, and suddenly it's like, that's not my mom. And I look at Ante, who was Finn's doppelganger, and I'm like, wow, Ante, you're really interesting. So he was the basis for this series, and I made this one a little grittier than the Witness series.
Mhm.
So the inspiration for the actual crimes and thriller aspect of this is the tiny, tiny little pockets of Los Angeles that most people don't know about.
Mhm.
Um, Little Ethiopia is really just about a half a block full of Ethiopian stores,
Mhm.
but they have this kind of underground community of rescuing people and from their home countries. And then there is, I want to say Rogers Farm, Richland Farms, which nobody knows about. Richland Farms is actually farmland in the middle of Los Angeles. And if you're on the freeway, you can see people riding horses if you know where to look. And I found that really fascinating. So I create these crimes within these tiny, tiny pockets of LA that, hopefully people will be intrigued enough to kind of seek them out someday if they ever come to this city, because a lot of authors write about LA, as the big metropolis.
Mhm.
But when you drill down and you look closer, there are these very small, mostly immigrant communities that were perfect for Finn. They were perfect for someone who also was an immigrant, who still had that mentality, and who was not surprised by any of the cultural aspects people
Mhm.
brought over, because he brought his own. And so yeah, there you go. And when you come over, we'll have dinner with Finn O'Brien.
Love it. I can't wait to read that one too.
I
You
stand, I
go,
know
man.
that.
Wow, your story is good. Like the whole time you selling, I'm like, well,
He is really, I tell you, I mean, I can't take much credit for Finn because he lives and exists, and he is he's awesome. So hopefully I captured him. And you know what? My sister-in-law doesn't know it, but she's really lucky. So
so I do have a question for you. Do you have any like upcoming novels or books coming out or
I
series?
do. I do. I'm working right now on the fifth book in the Finn O'Brien series called Distant Relations. And so those are all relations books. And then I have another idea for a standalone I really, really want to work on, because I was inspired by, there's a psychological concept called the instant of need.
Mhm.
And what happens to humans when they really have that instant where terror is just too much. And so I think a really good crime that will go with that one. One of these days I'm seriously going to write a book about knitting, but I don't know. My husband keeps saying, don't you have anything else in your brain other than crime?
Man, you could write what Stephen King did with that one book, Big Driver, with the woman that wrote the books that was a crime fighter. Like, I don't know. Like,
oh, and she knits too. Oh,
yeah,
I totally missed that one.
Well, it was the book that she wrote. She wrote the crime knitting women.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I know there's lots of cat mysteries and lots of dog mysteries, but I've never heard about the knitting mystery. So that's an I will go look that up for sure.
So my last and final question: what advice would you give our listeners who would want to pursue a writing career like yourself?
Oh man, I would tell them first and foremost, chill, because eventually it happens. If you're excited about learning the craft, if you're excited about books, I think if you're an avid reader, you kind of already know how the flow is supposed to go. Most people worry too much about, will I sell it? Will anyone read it? I think in those initial stages, the reason I was successful is because it was a lark. Someone dared me to do this and it sounded like, oh, wow, how fun. It didn't sound like, oh no, I'm terrified. It sounded like fun. And above all, just remember, everyone has a voice and everyone's voice is unique. Don't wonder whether your voice sounds silly or crazy. You know what? If this is your voice, put it down on paper. You can go back, you can edit, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. Just put it down on paper. Find one person you trust who's going to tell you the truth. And yeah, I know that was not my mother, by the way. I could not trust my mother at all. And my husband doesn't read my books, so that's it. But I did find a wonderful person who was an avid reader and so insightful. And she would say, you know what, it's a great idea, but you're going on too long, or you're doing this, you're doing that. And it was one voice. I think writers' groups can be difficult because you hear so many people. Right. So if you have one person who's willing to do that for you, let them do it. But above all, just attack it with the great sense of, I'm going to tell this story, period. And don't worry about sales. Don't worry about, agents and editors right off the bat. You have a lot of freedom when you're trying something because it's fun for you.
Oh, that's really great advice, because I'm starting to write my first book and I'm like,
okay, I'm your voice. I'll be your voice.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Wait a minute. Are you going to be my competition?
Oh, no.
Oh, then okay. No. All right, we're good. Then, because I was gonna have to take the invitation back. That's all.
I want to thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on my podcast today and chatting with me.
Thank you. It was absolutely delightful. I really enjoyed it.
You have a great day.
All right, you too.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me.